Hey, what's going on, guys? I hope everyone is having a good week so far in the stock market. Crazy times that we're currently in. And in this video, I kind of wanted to talk about a stock that I'm insanely invested in. I'm very bullish on this. I've been talking about it with my friends, and I want to make a video on it. So, eventually when it hits, I can reference this video, and it would be very satisfying to see. Um, Before I dive into it, I do want to talk a little bit about AMD. Kind of just give it away there. It's going to be talking about Webull, but AMD has been an insane stock. I talked about it briefly about a year ago. It was a stock that I invested in a lot. Most of my weighting was on AMD. Um, and I have then sold some stock just to kind of take some profit and rebalance. But AMD has been an amazing investment. Back then, before Liberation Day, the stock was pretty much flat. And then, as you guys can see, we had lows of $77, which is where I entered. I caught the bottom of this. I know it's crazy to say that, but I did. I bought in at the 77 mark. And the reason why I invested a lot into this, and my thesis at the time was data center growth. If you're truly going to see AI growth go where it's going to go, what's not to say that AMD isn't going to be a stock to follow along with Nvidia, right? Everyone at the time was buying Nvidia. People were saying that AMD is cooked. They're not going to become successful and blah blah blah. But Jensen is actually cousins with Lisa, and so that also gave me conviction that look, they're cousins together. Maybe they could work something out. But also, besides the relationship side, data centers has been growing substantially, and that if AMD were to invest in that, we would see substantial growth, right? I mean, the stock was, from the highs was at 230, it was down 67%, right? And I saw it as an opportunity as a on sell, 67% downside, 67% upside on recovery. Um, and we got just that. The cash flows of it were great. Maybe I should probably pull this up here. So like the cash flow, uh, show you guys there. So yeah, as you guys can see, despite it, despite AMD having great earnings reports, AMD still kept falling lower on every single report. And, maybe it was just the guidance and things like that, but that was one of my convictions on why I longed it. And that ended up being one of my best investments now seeing 300. So, congrats to anyone who took that with me. Just wanted to kind of point it out in this video. But anyway, let's kind of get touched on the Weeble. So I've been talking a lot about Webull. They are a more recent IPO company, and as you guys know, IPOs tend to be very risky. One of them that I've invested in was Figma. That was a not the worst decision of mine. I've never bought into an IPO, but I did buy at a high price, around like $100 or so, and I'm still holding Figma. Of course, I still think it's a company that will be more in the coming years, more established. But of course, we're in the game for the long run. These are long-term investments. This is completely different from day trading or swing trading. But I'm more focused on the business model and do I use the product, right? And I use Figma at times whenever I'm doing web design and vice versa. So, but not the point, right? The point being is what's the business, right? Why am I investing in the company in the first place? And so one of them is Webull, right? Webull, when I first started trading, which was 4 or 5 years ago almost now, um, I started off with Webull. That was a platform I started off with, and I love it till this day. I still have an account with them, and I have some investments with them, of course. But Webull is a platform that I always liked. That it was friendly, it was easy to use. So somewhere in the beginning it wasn't as much, but as I got more advanced, I loved the platform. I paper traded a lot with Webull, and it just taught me kind of to get my feet wet. So Bull, it IPO'd, its high price was $79. Now, what a lot of people don't see that I believe is besides the quantitative stuff about Webull, their fundamentals, is when Hood first went IPO, right? So if you go here, the high price was 154. When they first went IPO, they popped at $84 and then bottom to $6.20. Um, and what I'm saying here is it almost seems like we're following the same trajectory with Hood, but with Webull. Um, what a lot of people don't know is when Hood went IPO, they weren't profitable. They weren't profitable at all. It was during a time of COVID where there was not a lot of risk on momentum, and a lot of their revenue was driven by volume on options. Right, a lot of retail traders would trade options, but there wasn't sufficient volume, so they weren't profitable. Or they were making money, of course, but they were selling common stock. Um, in that case, when they eventually became profitable, that's when the market caught on to Hood. The market recovered, Bitcoin recovered, and the market kept going higher. We ended up seeing a small run, and then we ended up getting that recovery to $68, and then 2025 of Liberation Day, $30 went to 156. So Hood is a very interesting stock. I also like Hood now. I used to not like Hood. I used to think it was a shitty platform. Um, Excuse my language there, but Hood is a platform that I join now looking for extended hours, things like that. So essentially, what I'm saying is my thesis going forward with Webull is that the market isn't pricing in what potentially could be a high growth play on Webull due to the unprofitability, the margins, and the concerns. And so, most recently, we saw a PDT rule get lifted. I will show you guys that here. It was recently that the FINRA and SEC dropped this rule now, which is going to provide more liquidity for traders, right? Specifically, 0DT traders. They're going to provide more volume. There's going to be more commission revenue, and Webull has a better margin requirement than other platforms, and they have longer extended hours for trading. So I think that almost favors them in that sense, right? And I was listening to the earnings call and presentation. They're also developing a platform called Vega, which is an AI assistant. And so that tells me that they're okay. Look, they're developing, they're adapting into AI. This company is not just falling behind. Um, they're adapting into implementing artificial intelligence into the platform for traders, and so I see that and I like that, right? So PDT rule, that's a good rule, lifted it. I think it's going to provide more liquidity towards Webull. The Vega implementation of AI on Webull is going to be great, I believe. Um, and here's their kind of the results, right? Their year over year base has grown. It's been somewhat constant, but it's been growing at a rate that I think is reasonable. I like to see that personally, right? So this is more on the quantitative side, looking at the numbers. I like to see that customer assets have also grown, including their deposits have also grown. And you can see here their options trading volume has also increased by 40% year over year, right? So I believe projecting going forward after the June 4th is when the PDT rule is going to get lifted across all platforms. I think when we see that, that's when we'll see the market kind of more rally on broker names like Hood and Webull. So I hold some Hood, but I'm going heavier on Webull. Um, so that's kind of my thesis going forward and its fundamentals. Um, but I think Webull is a great stock, even though it's not fully profitable yet. As it's same with Hood. At the time it wasn't, but for those that invested, which I had the opportunity to, I wasn't as educated. I wasn't making as investments and stuff. But now that I see this is why I'm very bullish on Webull. Also, I think that it's a great platform. I mean, it's a no-brainer besides fundamentals. It's a great platform for traders, zero commission, and I don't know that, I'm not saying that we will would be at the same level as Hood, but I think it's somewhat there at that level. But yeah, so just figured out kind of disclose that. Look into it, guys. Not financial advice, but definitely will like to look forward to seeing this in a couple of years from now to see where we're at. If we see, I mean, $100 or back to all-time highs, that would be incredible. So, but hope you guys have a good day, and I'll keep in touch with y'all. See you guys.